Hey crafters, thanks for joining me here in the attic. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite beverage, and we'll get to crafting and memory keeping. Well, I did this whole part 2 tutorial and realized when I downloaded the video that I had not turned my microphone on. So I'm going to give it a shot at doing a voiceover. I hope you can make sense of what I'm saying. So for part 2, we're working on the Blush and Breezy kit. There will be a link down in the description box where you can go over and grab this kit on my Ko-fi site. If you missed part 1, I will have that link at the end of this video where you can go back and check that out. In part 1, we put this booklet together, the Blush and Breezy envelope journal. For part 2, we're going to decorate and do the closures for the envelopes. I did change my mind with how I wanted to do this. In part 1, I said I was going to do parts 1 and 2 with just this basic envelope journal. And then for parts 3 and 4, I was going to go back and show you how to make a larger journal. I decided as I was making the freebies that go with this kit that I wanted to just stick with this main envelope journal and embellish that with these freebies. The freebies can be found in my Facebook group. We're over there celebrating that I have reached 1,000 subscribers here on YouTube, so I'm doing the freebies that go with this kit to make a complete bundle kit. So be sure to go over and join us in the attic. The link will be down in the description box where you can join us there. Last week for week 1's freebie, I did a paper pack that goes along with this Blush and Breezy envelope journal. I'm going to do a brief flip through here of those pages. Week 2's freebie is ephemera. I've made some various pockets with journaling cards, some tags with more pockets. I did a trifold pocket with 3 tags. I also did some labels. You can use these labels as cluster bases or as journaling blocks, or even use them for fussy cuts. I did some watercolor base labels and some wax seals that I'll be using for my envelope closures. I'm going to go ahead and fussy cut out all of the embellishments, and then we'll come back and start our decorating process. Now that we've got everything cut out, I want to look at how I want to go about decorating this journal. I'll be adding some pockets to probably the front and back inside panels. And I'm going to be using these wax seals as my closures for my envelopes. To add a little bit of dimension to these wax seals, I'm going to be inking around the edge of them with the Distress color Lost Shadow. But before I add the wax seals, I want to go ahead and mat these strips where I attach the envelopes. I'm going to be using the pattern paper from week 1's freebies to make strips to mat these areas in the journal. These images were printed at 8.5 by 11, so they are bigger images than what I have for my envelopes. So I'm going to go back and reprint these at a smaller size. I went back and reprinted these at 2 to a page at a 5 by 7 size. This gives me a much smaller image to work with and also shows you how you can take digitals and adjust them to fit your project. You do not have to print them exactly as they were created. These images now fit much closer to the images on my envelopes. You can see the comparison here. These are much larger, but they would make great journal pages. They just don't fit the style of this journal here. Now I'm going to measure to see how I need to cut these images to fit the strips for matting this envelope. I'm going to be cutting these strips at 1/4 by 4 3/4. In addition to cutting the strips, I decided I wanted to cut some backing papers for the inside front panel and the back panel. I cut these at 3 3/4 by 4 3/4. Before I glue these in, I'm going to ink them up with the Kitsch Flamingo. Once I've inked up all the edges of my pieces, I'm going to go ahead and glue in the panels and the strips for the envelope journal. Now that all of those are glued in place, it's time to add my closures for my envelopes. Again, I'm going to be using these faux wax seals, and I'm just going to decide which one I want for each envelope. There are a few extras included in the kit, so you can decide which ones you want to use for each envelope. You do not have to use the same ones I'm using. I am again going to distress the edges with the lost shadow. When gluing in the wax seals, you want to make sure you don't add glue all the way to the top of the wax seal. You want to make sure that the envelope can tuck right underneath the wax seal. So I'm going to add my glue about 3/4 of the way from the bottom to the top. You want to get plenty of glue on the seal so when you're taking the envelope flap in and out, the seal doesn't pull away from the envelope. Be sure to line it up to where the envelope edge goes right underneath the wax seal. Now I'm just going to burnish that down and wait for the glue to dry. This glue dries pretty fast, so you don't have to hold it very long, but depending on what you're using for your adhesive, don't try to open and close that flap too soon. I'm going to repeat this step for all of the envelopes. And I'm going to set this aside to allow it plenty of time to dry. And then we'll come back and move on to the next decorating process. While we're waiting for that to dry, I'm going to go ahead and score all my pockets. I wanted to show you a little trick here. If you don't have a scoreboard, you can use your trimmer as a modified scoreboard. The trimmer does need to have a track, like where the blade goes. That's where you're going to be putting your piece up to do the scoring. Just like for a scoreboard, that track will allow your embosser to press down into the paper and make your embossed score. I'm going to go ahead and score up all these pockets and I'll come back. For this trifold pocket, I want to do something to cover up this white backing. I'm going to use the salvage patina with a blending brush. Now I'm going to ink up the edges using the tumbled glass. I like to use a regular blending applicator when I'm inking edges versus when I'm blending for a background I used the blending brush. Now I want to do some stenciling on this little trifold pocket, but instead of using a regular stencil, I'm going to use the negative where I cut out this die. When you do this, you can get a little bit more value for your dies and your things that you're purchasing because you're getting two things out of the one. I'm going to use the pine needle ink to do a little bit of stenciling with these leaves. I'm going to set this aside and go back to working on the journal because everything should be dry now. I wanted to show you another option for something you could have done instead of the paper matting here. I originally thought about using some ribbon to mat these strips. You still could use the ribbon, but I don't want to cover up my wax seal, so I'm not going to do that. And I wanted to show you how, if you didn't have things like ribbon, using the paper strips and things from the kit, you could still make a very beautiful project. I'm going to add some pockets to my journal. I think I'm going to add this one to the back as it blends well with this back image. I'm not going to do anything on the cover, but I am going to add a pocket on the inside and on the inside back cover. I'm going to go ahead and glue these in. Now that the pockets are all glued in, I want to start embellishing these pockets a little. I like to make clusters on these sometimes, and when I'm doing clusters, I like to grab a few things that I can kind of just creatively play with. I like to use some book page, I've grabbed my die cuts, I've grabbed my tiny attacher, some fibers, the labels, some vintage book page, and the fussy cuts. And I'm just going to do some creative play here. And I'm going to fast forward through this process and you can kind of see how I pick and choose things. Now that I've got the cluster kind of how I want, there's a couple ways you can put this together. You can completely take it back apart and glue all the individual pieces together. I have done that, and if I do, I like to snap a photograph so I kind of see how I've got everything laid out. But this is my favorite way to do it now. I like to take off the very top of whatever my cluster embellishment is, and then take all of it as one piece and take my tiny attacher and staple all the embellishments together. This allows all the embellishments to be attached in one piece without going back and gluing everything individually. Then if I don't want my staple to show, I'll take the top few embellishments that I took off and then glue those down right over the top of the staple. I just glue each one of these little flowers right into place over the staple, and it hides that I haven't attached them all individually. This was one of the best time-saving tips I ever got watching some YouTube videos, and I apologize, I do not remember who I got this tip from, but I'm sure it was someone very creative, and if I can ever remember who it is, I'll be sure to mention them in a future video. Now that I've got the cluster all together, I don't like that this little dolly edge is sticking over the edge of the label, so I'm going to go ahead and tear this apart. And I'm going to use a little ink here just to add a little extra dimension to this little cluster. Now I'm going to glue the cluster down into the journal. Sometimes I will make these clusters in more of a mass make style that I can just grab as I'm making different projects, and sometimes I'll do them for each individual project. It is a personal preference, whichever you prefer, and I do both. But now that this cluster is all one piece, all I've got to do is add glue to the back of the cluster instead of gluing each individual piece down onto the pocket. I'm going to move on to the back pocket, and I'm going to fast forward through this so that you can watch the process as I put this cluster together. This time I am going to use one of the labels that came in the freebie for week 2. Now that I've got the cluster all put together, I'm going to again glue this inside onto the journal. I did not hide the little paper clip this time because I wanted it to add a little bit of texture. So I'm just going to glue this down just like I did the first one. So this is where I'm going to end part 2 for this little envelope journal. For part 3, we will be using week 3's freebies that go along with the Blush and Breezy envelope journal kit. So be sure to hit the subscription button and the notification bell so you'll be notified anytime I put up any new content. And be sure to come join us over in the Addicts Facebook group where you can find lots of inspiration from myself and all the wonderful members that are in the group. So until I see y'all again here in the attic, y'all take care.